Hello everyone, we are ready to start now and I request everyone to mute themselves. Good afternoon, my name is Mahantesh. I'm Associate Publisher and Director Community with 9.9 Group. Welcome to CION Leader and Tata Communications webinar titled Getting Back to Work in the Post-COVID World. Collaborate seamlessly, enable the future of work. Getting back to work in the post-pandemic era would be challenging, and many of us, especially the IT leaders, are already anticipating the needs that would arise with part of the workforce still working from home, while some would be joining offices. A top priority would be enabling and optimizing digital collaboration more than before. We need to bring everything and everyone together, enhance productivity, and discover smarter teamwork on a global scale, virtually. The scenarios could vary. The bottom line remains the same. That is, need to collaborate, engage, and communicate beyond borders and remotely. This calls for virtual collaboration tools and practices that ensures seamless connectivity between teams across sites, offices, and geographies. All this without sacrificing operational efficiency and while optimizing workforce functions, managing costs, and avoiding silos. That brings us to our session, Getting Back to Work in the Post-COVID World. Collaborate seamlessly, enable the future of work. I would like to now invite our expert from Tata Communications, Karthik Ramasubramanian. Karthik currently serves as Solutions Engineering Lead for the South at Tata Communications. He has 21 years of progressively responsible international telecommunications, ICT, digital services experience, including technical solutions consulting and management for enterprise and carrier services customers, pre and post sales, including 16 years in the US. He now leads a pre-sales team responsible for supporting services across network, cloud, security, unified communications and collaborations, mobility and IoT, covering the breadth of the services Tata Communications provide globally. In today's session, he will be taking us through the seamless, ultra-agile and fully managed communication experiences with Tata Communications powered Cisco Webex platform. Post his presentation, we will also have Tata Communications powered Cisco Webex demo video. Just a reminder, if you have a question during the presentation, please post it in the chat box on your screen. The questions will be taken up by the speaker after the demo video. Over to you, Karthik.
Thank you, Mahesh. That was very generous of you. And thank you, everybody, to start with in terms of your time on what's possibly a very busy Thursday afternoon. So in one of the internal sessions that we had this morning, it was interesting. They had a poll as part of one of the ending presentations where the question was, what is the main issue or concern or problem facing humanity today? And the three choices were, one was, of course, COVID. The other was climate change. And the third was the number of webinars we have these days, right? So that's kind of where things are. So I completely appreciate the fact that you've made time for this. So I'll try to keep it pretty short and sweet so that the demo and the Q&A can probably be more interactive, right? So my few slides here are only to give you more of an overview of what Tata Communications as a digital enabler has been doing across the board, both pre-COVID and more importantly these days, after life as we know it has changed quite a bit. So in general, you might know us as, a telecoms provider, but we have a very big part to play in the cloud security, unified communications and collaboration, and the IoT side of things as well, to go with all things network, which we are obviously the experts in, and which is what builds, sort of a platform on which all of these other services are delivered. So having said that, what are we doing from a COVID perspective? What's happened in the last sort of, 90 to 120 days, if you will? In our own case, we've enabled about 98% of our workforce to work from home 2 weeks after sort of the first lockdown hit, right? So that's how effective we were, because Part of the fact was that given that we were an enterprise that was already, going down that path, it was pretty easy for us to enable that. And second, that's a big testament to also the existing modernization of our network, and also how quickly we can actually enable upgrades, right? So that was a very big part of it. And the fact that we could do it for ourselves so quickly gave us a lot of confidence in terms of what we could do for customers as well. So we've delivered, over 700 orders, sort of in the last 3.5 to 4 months. There's been sort of a 2 terabyte almost increase in terms of additional bandwidth that we've seen, because mainly customers are all looking for bandwidth now, right? Because you have both sides of the equation. One is more from upgrades required at the core and branch sites to a certain extent, but the other is also looking at where they have centralized internet, the usage of that centralized internet now going up with the view of VPNs being kept in mind. Right. So overall, if you look at the customer base we have, there's been a 30% growth in internet traffic. And, just in March alone, in terms of the amount of enterprise voice that we saw going through the network, we recorded a new hit of about 1 billion minutes. This is just not including the wholesale or anything else. It was only our own enterprise customers. Right. And so that's where we've seen, an IP traffic increase of about a 25% quarter on quarter compared with where we were, the last quarter. So these are some of the proof points in terms of what we've been doing during this time. And the 3 or 4 areas that we've been working with customers, if you will, in terms of a return to COVID or a post-COVID world, has mostly been around enabling VPNs more from a compliance perspective, looking at ways of making your broadband perform better and more efficiently, and also the collaboration side of things, right? So today's session is focused more on, a specific portion of the collaboration side of things, because our collaboration suite probably has, a multitude of solutions. So today we'll touch upon the Cisco Webex solutions briefly. Yeah. So Mantesh, if you want to move to the next slide. And you can complete populating each of the slides here, because there's a little bit of animation that can take some time. So you can move to the next one. Yep.
Sure.
So this gives you a quick view of just the, disparate, items that exist in the UC space today if you took any customer, right? So just to hit on a couple of, what you see here on the screen, one would be the management of multiple access numbers, right? Because rarely does an enterprise go with just 1 or 2 providers in terms of trying to get their numbers, unless they have, a lot of trust on that provider. So historically, we've seen one area of potentially where we could help is, being able to consolidate, and become one of the very, one of maybe 1 or 2 providers that can provide a global set of numbers consistently, whether it's toll free, whether it's looking at, local PSTN number replacements, whether it's offering you all of the local services, including emergency calling that come with that, and then being able to integrate that with the other aspects of, your UCC, portfolio as such, right? So, typically you have your conferencing, you have your calling, you have your presence, collab, and you also have the number side of things that you look at integrating across all of this. And then you have it working, between your computer and your laptops versus, hard phones and the office setup as well. So the idea is, you'll have to look at something that marries this, in a very, precise and consistent manner, and doesn't really hit you with a big sort of investment day one, but sort of can be spread out over time, and where you can also, not completely get rid of legacy systems, but try to use the best of what you have, but maybe, marry it well with what you're actually buying newly. So this gives you a quick idea of how that, what are the different disparities that we deal with when we work, across this section. We can move to the next slide, Mantesh. And this gives you a quick view of what we do today, right? So again, today we offer, Tata Communications can offer complete local PSTN replacement in about 29 countries actually. And when I say that, that means a customer does not have to actually contract with any of the local providers or any other providers, right, for any of your number services. So we can do that for you. And so there's obviously a difference between how we do this solution, the overall solution in terms of the UCC pieces in regulated versus non-regulated countries. So when we talk of the PSTN replacement here, typically that's, for the non-regulated countries where that goes, and we constantly add to this list as well on a yearly basis, right? So, most of the larger countries across the world today, when you talk of non-regulated countries, it's mostly across Europe, the US, Canada, and we have a lot of countries in the Asia Pacific, some content also coming up now. So we have quite a few additions in that space over the last couple of years, which are very interesting, especially for the BPO and the KPO organizations, right, in that space. We have our voice POPs in terms of the core POPs spread out across the world. So in terms of being able to peer with the very large companies, Cisco in this case, it's completely spread out across the board. And so we don't have any issues in terms of the reach and latency side of things, yeah, or also in terms of the high availability of the platforms themselves. Now, obviously, what powers this entire ecosystem is our underlying network, right? So today we are the largest provider and owner of subsea cable capacity, right? So we have, the Tata Global Network, the TGN cable system that runs across the board in terms of being the only ring that runs across the entire world. And it comes in different pieces. So that is our own system. And besides that, we also have, other, consortium systems that we've invested in. So with that said, given we've always been a very strong force on the voice side and the wholesale side of things, we're a carrier's carrier, right? So in terms of experience with voice, today we do 72 billion plus, minutes a year, where that takes into account all of the wholesale voice side of things. So we help carriers, transport voice between continents, right? So that's how we have experience in that space as well. And so even in terms of the mobile carrier ecosystem, we have a big part to play because we are the back-end platforms that a lot of these carriers use. You can move to the next slide, Mantesh. Yeah, so as I was saying, you can pop, complete pop, yeah. And again, the key thing in terms of understanding, our relationship with Cisco is the fact that, it's not just the UCT space, but the entire suite, and also including network and the optimization side of things, right? So today, in terms of being one of the premier partners for Cisco across their SD-WAN space, in terms of both the Cisco solutions and the Viptela-based solutions, we are right there globally with them. So we were among, the first in India to actually partner with them here. We've been offering SD-WAN for, since 2016. The Cisco portfolio was added last year because obviously Cisco with Viptela is a very strong force on that area. So including that capability with all of our cloud connections, because again, we connect to, 12 different clouds across the world, and, we offer direct connectivity to all of the larger clouds today in terms of the public CSPs. From the pure voice perspective, we enable, voice for the Webex network, so more in terms of what is called CCA or cloud connected audio, where in terms of each, call that you get on, typically the number side of things, the voice side of things, being able to call in from the PSTN, being able to have the systems call you. So all of that can be enabled, that's where we come in. And that's what we do in terms of offering customers that capability, not just in a subset of locations globally, but anywhere, right? And we take care of being the single point of contact from that perspective. So the support side of things is where we really score, because obviously, for customers, that are spread out, that today have a multitude of providers, the fact that you could just have one provider who can support you globally, for all of these aspects is what makes a big difference, right? And again, in terms of the quality of those relationships at the back end with these other providers is also of the first grade, because, given we're a carrier's carrier, we're able to get those economies of scale going. The last bit obviously goes without saying, because of the network, because of the stronger interconnects with Cisco that we have globally, the main thing that we guarantee for you is the actual experience, right? So what you get from a service like Cisco Webex, especially when it's Tata Communications powered, is the fact that, the performance is second to none. So whatever you see these days in terms of some of the other tools that are available, for free, that a lot of us do tend to look at these days, the key difference between more of an enterprise offering like a Webex is the guaranteed experience, right, from an SLA perspective. And what we add is almost, a full concierge type service, if you will, in terms of looking at how this can integrate with the other portions in terms of meetings, calling, and the device side of things. We can move, Mantesh. So this just completes that previous portion in terms of what I was talking about. What do we bring to the table? So it's more in terms of being, a really reliable and trustworthy partner for Cisco. We have among the largest Webex install bases here. In terms of usage, again, this has been a very successful service for us, right? So the biggest customers here, have used this service with us. We are increasingly seeing an alignment with either the Cisco Webex side of things or the Microsoft Teams side of things, both of which Tata Communications has a lot of experience in. And again, here the whole point here is that globally we've had that trust level established with Cisco, where along with the network, along with the managed service side of things, unified communication collaboration has become an integral part, of that ecosystem, in terms of being able to power this connection and connectivity from anywhere, right? So we can move, Mantesh. So what are we looking for, right, overall in terms of the suite today? So as I said, the Webex suite today comprises meetings, calling, and devices, and obviously the Teams collaboration side of things is the next step. We are one of the 5 Cisco partners globally that has the experience and the expertise and capability to actually offer the gold standard experience, as they call it, on a global level consistently. We offer the entire gamut of services. So whether it's telepresence as a service, whether it's Webex cloud-connected audio service provider, where it's more enabling your offices to connect through even the global SIP offerings that we have, whether it's contact center as a service that is a whole practice of its own, where it's a complete a cloud-based contact center that we can offer for you, which is Cisco powered on a global basis. And whether it's IP telephony, right? So, and all of this with a combination of an on-prem versus a hybrid versus a cloud-based sort of combination solution as well. So we would look at what works best with your ecosystem, understand where you are, where you've come from, and then take it from that angle, right? So we've been an established partner with them. We've been partner of the year for 4 years in a row. We have very good experience across the board here, and we've won all types of awards from the likes of IDC, Frost & Sullivan, Cisco themselves having chosen us as their partner of the year, right? So Mantesh, we can probably move one more. So when we talk, the meetings aspect of things, right? What do you usually expect from meetings, right? So meetings should be open to anyone and everyone, right, in the organization. The scale has to include everyone. People need to be able to join from anywhere, right? So the whole concept today, especially post-COVID, is about being able to connect anywhere, anytime, any place. And going forward, when we talk non-UC, the point is that it can be anyone as well. It doesn't have to be humans. It can even be machines, right? When you talk the IoT side of things. So coming back, here the idea with meetings is that it shouldn't be restricted to just rooms or desktops. It needs to be extended to PSTN phones, mobile phones, any infrastructure basically that can support meetings and calling, right? And the security and analytics side of things are also extremely important, because the whole difference between what an enterprise grade solution like Webex gives you is more on the analytics side, right? Being able to study user behavior, understanding from the knowledge worker side of things, who are your power users, what are their usage patterns like. And the reason studying those is important is because your UC needs are constantly changing, right? So what one user does in a month may not be what he does for the other 11 months of a year, right? And what one team, how they collaborate in a given month may not be how they collaborate for the rest of the year. The point is you need to be able to empower and enable that anytime it's required. But on the other hand, you also need to be able to look at the commercial side of things, where you're also looking at your costs overall and trying to make a balance between the efficiency of what you're doing there, right? So that is where the security and the analytics side of things really hit home. And what you get from Webex in terms of the analytics is second to none. Again, so that's where they score over some of the other solutions that we see today in the market. And the idea is you need to be able to collaborate, offline as well. And when you go to the next step in terms of the team side of things, the point there is you integrate, collaboration, calling, whiteboarding, and all of that put together, right? And all of this in a very flexible manner. So when we talk calling, again, it's not just So what are the issues that typically you see with calling, right? So what you usually come across is more related to the cost and productivity and the productivity and complexity side of things, right? Because you want to reduce the amount of IT support you provide. So, to enable, your users to be able to call regardless of what connections they're on, how they're connecting, that's what you need to enable. So with Webex, that gets, you have 2 different flavors. And today, Webex calling is offered right off the cloud itself. What Tata Communications does, again, is to basically expand that capability, across the globe, right? In terms of being able to give you some choice in terms of, your own numbers in addition to what Cisco can provide. And it's about giving you an integrated SLA, right? It's about, making that whole calling experience much more integrated, right? So today, we all expect when we pick up a Webex call, we all have those 2 or 3 different ways in mind where we can go into the audio side of things. You're never worried too much about the bandwidth because you know that you can even make it work, on your normal internet connection, right? Even if it's not on the private connection. And so there is 2 or 3 different methods with which you can get your audio to work. Again, compared to some of the other solutions where the audio side of things is not even offered separately, right? Or there is a bit of complexity in terms of how you actually procure that, how you actually, support it, and how you actually go about, enabling that for the entire organization. And again, where Cisco scores is basically when you look at the licensing side of things. Previously, when you talk the flex licenses, you had your named user, active user, and all of that. But the idea again was that some of this was not offered in a unified manner. So previously you had your Teams collaboration, you had to combine that with your cloud meetings to get one sort of license. Similarly, from the calling side, what you had known as dedicated collaboration services, the DCS side of things, which was more when you had an on-prem sort of setup, versus when you have what is Cisco HCS, which is more of the hosted collaboration services, which is more of a virtual dedicated type of a solution, right? So that's what again we would power for you. We have a complete full-blown cloud-based HCS solution as well. The idea again is today with what the EA type of license offers for you is one unified license across the board, right? So you don't have to look at getting a separate license for meeting, calling, and all of that comes integrated, and it gives you the most cost-effective way that you can actually enable this, right? And the final piece in this puzzle is more in terms of the device side of things. So again, very briefly to touch upon Webex devices. So rather than having to worry about, previously you had your devices, but then you actually had to get sort of a DCS gateway that would function as, the bridge that would go to the rest of the world in terms of being able to connect with the other systems. Today, you kind of just have to expose the license onto, what are called Webex ready devices, and that can right away, make your devices, directly, participate into Webex meetings, right? And whether it's, Teams or, a calling or a conference, either way. And the idea that with Cisco, they've been established across the board, right? So the whole pocket to boardroom terminology came from what they did, going back to when they started off in the TP space. And so today, even most companies don't look at that separately, right? You don't tend to look at TP or VC separately when you talk about your UC experience. You want to have all of that integrated, right? So video everywhere again, whether it's room-based or whether it's personal, is what they want to enable. And I think increasingly we've gotten over our inhibitions against video as well over the last 3 months, right? So the one positive I would take from what's happened over the last 3 months definitely is video now is very, very common. It's not what it was, and we don't really have that inhibition anymore. And even from a network point of view, I think most networks are behaving today, right? So I don't think hopefully any of you have had a lag in the video you're seeing today, and even with the demos going forward today, I'm hoping that's the case. But the idea there is that's how far home broadband has also come, right? So with that and with what's happened, we do believe that Cisco Webex is here to stay. Where Tata Comms helps again is the guaranteed on-net voice quality, very, very easily scalable when you come to us. Your investments are protected, so we are here all the way for you. You sign sort of on a longer term if you want, and say 1 year from now, something entirely new has happened in the industry and Cisco's coming out with something, we would consult with you in terms of the best way for you to protect what you already have invested, and how you can sort of upgrade, but also look at what's the best way to do that is, right? So you're not left in the lurch. It's not like buying something off the cloud where, here's something and off you go and you're on your own. It's a complete managed service. And that's where we score, right? So with our experience across the board, different types of companies, different use cases that they use these, collaboration solutions for, that's basically what we enable for you, right? So you can go to the next slide, Mante. So I think the last slide pretty much is just one of the case studies we have. Simrise is more of a chemical company that touches us in very, very different ways. So they have flavor side and nutrition side, and essentially what they do is whether it's toothpaste, whether it's perfume, a lot of what the fragrance side of things, what the taste side of things that we actually experience. A company like Simrise is behind that. So they're a very global company. The problem they had was that they had a very disparate set of systems powering their UC side of things. They had a lot of legacy systems as well. And when they came to us, they had several different providers on the voice side too, right? Just pure numbers as well. And the idea was to see what, in a longer term, would be a good solution for them to go with. And sure enough, we went with a Cisco Webex-based offering. It was a more of a hybrid setup, but it was completely managed. And we gave them, both managed hosting and the video and voice completely integrated. And today they've been very successfully able to use that as a platform for their employee collaboration and also potentially with their, customers as well. So even in terms of working with their suppliers and vendors, it's been a great way for them to do that. The beachhead service, which talks about them being ready to actually service with a 1,000-user facility in Singapore, was a big testament to how they could power that, right? So with that, Mantesh, I'll probably just finish this. I'm sure we can look at all of the questions separately in the Q&A session. I wasn't sure if you wanted to take that up now or just go with the demo first and then look at the questions. Yeah, but thanks very much again for the opportunity.
Thank you, Karthik. We'll be taking the questions after the video. Yep. Like I said, we'll be taking up questions post the Tata Communications powered Cisco Webex demo video. I would urge everyone to send in your questions on chat. Vivek, can we have the video, please? Tata Communications powered Cisco Webex solution. Okay, we'll now move on to the next part of the session. But just before we start the Q&A session, let's have a look at the list of people who have answered the quiz correctly and won themselves a rupees 500 gift voucher. Vivek, can we have the list, please? Okay, there we have the winners of the quiz. I hope everyone is able to see them. Congratulations to all the winners. Your gift vouchers will be emailed to you shortly. Now we can start taking up questions for Karthik. Karthik, the first question is on Cisco collaboration experience. Will it be complying with DoD OSP compliance as well? That's by Nitin.
Yeah. So Mahante, this is Praveen here. So can I take that question?
Please go ahead, Praveen.
Yeah. So from a compliance perspective, yes, Tata Communications solution is complied with the law of the land that is defined by TRAI, both from a hosted environment as well as in a cloud provided telephone environment. So what we do is typically it's not just India alone specifically. So across the world there are several regulated countries and non-regulated countries. So the whole solutioning is defined differently for the regulated countries to comply with the law of the land, and similarly for the non-regulated countries where the whole telecom compliance is not too strict and so forth. That is where the whole domestic PSTN services that come into where the entire LNS or the DID infrastructure goes on cloud. But for regulated countries, we create a different solution that complies with the law of the land. And this is not just specific to India, but this is across various regulated countries across the globe. The solution is designed.
Okay.
And just to add to that, Mantesh, the advantage of sort of working with someone like us is that we look at it not just from a Webex perspective, right? So from the regulation side, we also look at, how you're powering that, how you're enabling employees to connect, whether that's compliant with the regulations here. So it's not just, the UC side of things, but you can look at it together with the security side of things and understanding, whether you're still in compliance with what DOT mandates.
Okay, great. I hope, Nitin, you get your clarification both from Karthik as well as Praveen. I think they answered it pretty well. Thank you all. The next question is how TCL can ensure QoS on internet?
So that's always a question of contention, right? So there is no QoS on the internet. I'm sorry, I didn't get the name there for the question. Yeah, thanks. So the idea is that when we talk of QoS, it's more in terms of the voice side of things, and where it is powered either sometimes between the SIP circuit side of things where it is over a private network, but also talking about the back-end connections, which are the larger connections that exist between the CSPs. So when I talk about our larger back-end connections, say between us and Cisco globally, that tends to be where you score over rather than coming in over the public internet side of things. Yeah. So when we put the SLA on some elements of these solutions, those are the bits on which we can actually assure the quality of service, right? But overall, when we talk QoS, on the voice side, it's more about your connectivity and how good the performance is. So you're right, there is no QoS on the internet, so to speak, but it's how you put the solution together and what the best way to enable that solution to work is.
Okay. Thank you, Karthik. There's another question. Our organization is planning to move the UC infrastructure to the cloud, but we have large investments in on-prem setup, and we have not yet realized full ROI for this investment. How can Tata Communications help us migrate to the cloud while retaining our existing investment?
Yeah, so that's what we mean, and most of the larger providers as well have this in mind, right? When we talk of both the managed on-prem hybrid setup, which is more when we actually host it on our cloud versus something that's entirely cloud-based, whether it's with our cloud or with the Cisco cloud itself, so to speak, right? So you have an interworking between all of these three. So what we would do is we would basically come in, we would work with you. Praveen Jaipal here, who was answering the first question, he leads the UC sales organization for the South. And Praveen's team pretty much does this on a daily basis, right? So what they do is basically go out to a customer, understand what they have today and where they want to go. And obviously it goes without saying that the overall cloud push is playing a big part on the UC side of things as well. So similar to you wanting to go to cloud for your other bits, UC is also something where that push very much exists. And the fact that, most companies do want to do that sooner than later is also where you face this issue. But yeah, in terms of, sort of charting that path, if you will, is what we would do for you, right? So to understand which elements of that investment cannot be changed at all, right? Or which elements of it can sort of go to the cloud day one versus, 12 months from now, 24 months from now. What is Cisco themselves doing in terms of how they're phasing some of these things out versus, how long are they going to continue supporting those bits for? Which aspects of these would work better if we were to do it in a hybrid form versus what works better from an on-prem setup? So those are the types of things that, we would look at and then jointly come up with what works best for you. So it's not a one solution for any customer. It tends to work more based on studying, each customer's infrastructure as well. Praveen, if you want to add to that.
Oh yeah, so pretty much to what you said, the idea of moving a customer to a cloud is not to completely do away the existing infrastructure. It's to plug and play with what they already have. And as Karthik mentioned, the idea is that we could start off in a very phased approach, where in phase one we could do an hybrid environment, figure out the elements that are in an end of sale, end of service, or maybe your AMC is due on certain hardware, or maybe that you're looking at an upgraded feature functionality on some license version upgrade and so forth. We could keep some of those components, we could retain some of those components and then move some of the other components to the cloud platform and do a very phased migration so that you reap your ROI of your existing investment while you move into a more recent and more better featured platform. So yes, the simple answer to your question is yes, you could reap the ROI of your existing infrastructure, but we could do a phased up migration from a on-prem to a hybrid vis-a-vis to a full-fledged cloud environment.
Thank you, Praveen. And about security presentation, but I think there is a specific question. Most of the employees working from home today, right? Security seems to be the biggest concern for IT team. Now, how secure is on Cisco Webex collaboration services from a home perspective? That's the question posed by one of the attendees.
And it's actually a good question, because one of the clear differentiators for Cisco itself, which again, compared to one other competitor was in the news recently, was also around the fact that everything is encrypted end to end, and it extends to both video and voice. The comparison that was made in the news recently was one of the others only did it for voice. The video side of things was not encrypted, and so there was a comparison. But from a Webex perspective, it's amongst the most secure platforms and service enablers that you have from the UC side. From a user perspective and the home broadband perspective, so the idea is how you're actually coming into that environment from the user side as well, right? So, and that's where you have to look at the DoT compliance and regulations and how you're connecting to this, and whether it's more purely from an enterprise perspective or more from a customer being sort of an OSP customer, where it is more of the contact center type applications that you have as well. So how you implement security to cover different elements of what I just mentioned can be a little different, right? So you have a very standard VPN, which can still, as long as it's provided by a service provider, serve as your PPVPN, and that's how you can actually get access into the OSP center itself, right? And then you have Webex as a platform, which is the most secure platform there is compared to some of the others. And so it's a combination of all of these that you would have to look at. The endpoint security these days is typically something that customers are also worried about, because previously everything was sort of provided by the company. Today you have a mix of both, right? You have some larger companies that have, given their desktops or laptops to be taken home, and then you have other companies which are going the BYOD way, which is bring your own device. How do you actually enable, endpoint security to work in these cases, and how does that work in conjunction with, what Webex can offer is what you look at as well.
Okay. Thank you, Karthik. There is a related question on migration, which you and Praveen took up a while ago. He says, do you have your own platform framework for any standard migration based on the years of experience you have in this domain?
Well, sure. So in terms of a framework, right, the idea would be, so yeah, I mean, our experience, because it cuts across different types of customers, rather than telling you that this is a standard framework and you have to work through it, I think typically the way we approach customers is, it's completely on a customized basis, right? Because no two customers are usually alike in this front. UC especially is very, very complex, right? At least from what I've come across. Very rarely do we have the same template and cookie cutter approach that you can employ between two different customers. You have your domestic and international pieces itself, which are very different. And then you also have sort of the different use cases that customers have in terms of how they're using it, right? And you could have multiple UC solutions that exist within a customer environment as well. So I don't think I can tell you that we have one framework. In terms of the platform, again, we have 2 or 3 different services that we've aligned with, right? So what we do as a provider is that we sometimes enable the integration between 2 different platforms that you would not be able to get otherwise in the market on your own, or even from the OEMs themselves, right? So I think there's a couple of other questions that have touched on Microsoft Teams versus Webex and having both, and how does that work? And so that's where, as a provider, we can kind of, with our exposure to all of the other clouds, we can bring in that bridging capability, that, integration capability, so to speak, which otherwise would not be that easy to accomplish at all. But I wouldn't go to the extent of saying that there is one framework that we would deploy. Praveen, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the best way that I can probably answer that.
Yep. So further to what Karthik said, each customer's need is different in terms of their spread, in terms of their user profile and so forth. Typically, there is no one framework. There are multiple frameworks, and in an ideology, the whole framework revolves around in making sure the technology singularity is there, where they have a common telephony infrastructure across. Today, many companies have different infrastructures because their cost centers are different in different geographies. You may probably think of unifying that. That's the fundamental start of where the whole cloud unification framework starts. Parallelly, it goes very close quarters with the ROI that brings on by migrating a hardware or a capex or a captive intensive environment to a cloud intensive environment. There's a huge ROI that brings on it. So fundamentally, these are the 2 aspects that can be built, on which you can actually build a framework on. But there's no specific, step-by-step framework which can be generalized. It's customer specific and it's environment specific. But yeah, there are just 2 points you can probably look at. One is having a singularity on your technology and having an ROI of moving a captive capex intensive environment to a cloud environment. That's the basic framework of how you can look at a migration plan.
Thank you, sir. A couple of questions related to security, Karthik. I will take the first one. Webex needs to be open with links while many organizations.
Sorry, Mani, there's a bit of echo. Not sure if it's mine.
Sorry, Karthik?
Yeah, go ahead now. There seems to be some echo, so I'm just, yeah.
Okay. I was saying Webex needs to be opened with a link while many organizations don't permit Webex or other links to be clicked due to security reasons. How do we get attendees to join without clicking the link?
Sorry, I didn't get your question clearly, Mahadev. Can you repeat that? You said it was keep echoing.
Yeah, let me take a shot, Matesh, in case my voice is clearer. So I think this is
Yes.
a set of 2 or 3 different questions, Praveen, from a gentleman named Shankar Jadhav. So very good questions
Yes.
all. The first one is it's around the fact that a lot of organizations don't let employees just click on links to join meetings or other things because you have to join Webex in terms of a link. How do we get attendees to join without clicking a link as such? Right. The second one is more in terms of how Webex is heavy on bandwidth compared to some of the competitors. So the idea is, can Cisco provide an alternative with low bandwidth? And as a joke is, we want to see people and not pimples on their faces in most Webex meetings, right? And so I'll probably take a shot at these before going on, Praveen. So the first one, this is where I suppose the more you are enabled in the ecosystem, and the app can make it much more convenient and easier in some senses in terms of being synchronized automatically, right? And having to bring everything up. Yes, historically, some of or 1 or 2 of the others score over Webex in that sense, I suppose, in terms of that linking, joining, with the click. But the flip side of it is, again, I think that is one of the ways it has established itself as a premier provider. In terms of being able to offer that security, I'm not sure if what other alternates would be a good way to enable that, right? Rather than not being enabled through a link. So again, it's not a black and white answer, but Praveen, anything else that you have on that?
Oh yeah. So typically, many organizations have a frown in terms of how you allow somebody to click and join via URL. Maybe the URL could be a phishing URL and so forth. When it comes to a Cisco environment, the whole Webex uses a very highly encrypted platform, right? It has the whole media is transmitted via UDP, or it's encrypted via the latest AES 128 from a security standpoint. Similarly, it also uses the Talos, which is the famous Cisco high cipher protocol and so forth. So in terms of how the media is transmitted and so forth, the whole media stream is highly encrypted. So because of that, the whole Cisco URL getting clicked in is something is secure in that sense of it, and ideally you cannot have a phishing link that can be populated via a Cisco Webex link, because the whole Webex link is very common. Even the whole Webex URL is encrypted. Even the user may not know what URL it is. It is dynamic in nature and so forth. So there's different security measures and protocols that are taken in place for you to ensure that that link cannot be misused. Secondly, the other reason that why many organizations or even conferencing providers don't allow an auto integrated solution without clicking anything is because for 2 reasons. One, it kind of breaches into somebody's privacy. Maybe they're not ready to get into the call, or they're about to join a call, or they're in another call and so forth. It kind of intrudes in their conversation and so forth. And then especially in an environment where all of us are working from home and more or less we are in and out of calls, during the stipulated time, if somebody just pulls you in that call, then maybe it may not be very appropriate. It's not a technology limitation, it's more a user interface. So you still have options to do callback via Webex, either onto the VoIP or either on their mobile phone and so forth. So that's anywhere there today. But from a user experience standpoint, it really doesn't flavor very well. So that is the reason why it's not available. It is just not promoted very widely. I hope it answers in some sense, but yeah, we can definitely throw more idea or throw more light on it.
Yep, thanks, Praveen. The next one was more in terms of it being heavy on bandwidth. So again, I think Cisco has said that they try to work on something that was a little lower, but because of the encryption and everything else associated with it, I think that's where they still are comparatively higher bandwidth than the others. So again, I'm not sure if that's that's kind of status quo, so there's not much that we can say on that.
There's a small, sorry to interrupt, Karthik, there's a small improvement that Cisco has also done. The new Cisco Webex Teams platform is a highly, it's a highly, it works on very low bandwidth, and it's designed in such a way that, the bandwidth consumption doesn't go as a series consumption format. It goes based on user. For example, if there are multiple people on the call, and if most of us are stationary, or if you hide your video, then the bandwidth throughput automatically decrements and then goes to the user, or bridges to the user who's probably his video is on, or his bandwidth is on, and so forth, or is working on a lower bandwidth. The optimization happens dynamically on the flow itself. So just to give you an idea, for example, Karthik is on the video right now. Now, if he's just sitting still without major actions around, then the bandwidth consumption of it, because the pixelation is less, so the bandwidth consumption through him will be way lower. Earlier, the whole story was if he had an SD cam, then he has to probably throw a 2 MB, 3 MB, 4 MB, depending on the device he was sitting on. He would have had to throw a bigger bandwidth. But now the system is more intelligent, where depending on his movement, depending on the pixelation of his movement and so forth, the bandwidth consumption is pre-calculated, and then it optimizes on its own. So in that sense of it, the new Webex Teams optimizes bandwidth on lower utilization itself. So there is improvement around that space. You will see more activity around it. There are a couple of launches that are planned this year around this subject, and I guess we will hear more from Cisco on this.
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. There is another question related to security, Karthik.
Yeah.
How does security is ensured for the file and print devices accessed over VPN or VDI?
Right. So that's probably not for this topic, obviously, Mantesh, because this is more for on Webex, right? And I don't think the question has anything to do with the UC side of things. So, but in terms of to look at that, though, that is a combination of both how you're implementing your VPN and VDI, but also more from the endpoint side, what you have, and so what does the platform itself that you're developing or having VDI, how does that treat your files there? Typically these days, most of the cloud VDIs that you're setting up don't have any kind of local storage at all, right? So nothing pretty much is on your local machines, and so the access is according to your role-based definitions usually. So again, I'm not sure if that's related to what we're discussing today, but yeah, that's a separate world of its own.
Yeah. Right?
So
maybe just to give a little, a little more topic, because that's a larger conversation to go. Cisco uses a cryptology, a cryptography called HMAC, right? Which is a hash message, authentication code. This basically is a functionality during its encryption, where it not only authenticates the message, but it also verifies the data integrity from the source itself. So Cisco follows the HMAC protocol for data protection, especially on these devices and so forth.
Okay, Praveen. Thank you. There is another question. With so many UC platforms in the market today, how does one go about Cisco Webex? What are some of the USPs of Cisco Webex that one should consider before implementing UC solutions?
So let me take that. So from a UC platform, yes, today, from the time 20 years ago, what was UC and what it is today, there has been a huge, evolution in terms of how the whole UC practice has come up. And today, companies that have been UC ready and have been in that space and who have already invested in the UC environment, today reap the benefit, especially in the current COVID environment. While we are having our current session, which is a fully UC designed environment, is where the future is headed to. And based on that, there are several technologies that have come up, left, right, everywhere. And there are small-time web-based providers. There are providers who have just spun out of larger companies and started things on their own, and so forth. But fundamentally, you see, from a large enterprise or even a medium enterprise scale, to have better stability, to make sure that there is a lot of data protection, to make sure that the OEM who is actually providing the services is heavily invested enough to heavily invested enough to make enough upgrades from time to time to protect or mitigate threats that are also growing as in rate. The more technology grows, the more vulnerability also is built or also gets assigned or comes along with it. So largely, when you pick up a UC partner, I think you need to one has to make sure that is this particular partner there for the long haul? Is this partner cash rich for him to make sure that they can continuously grow, mitigate any threats in the future, and so forth. And parallelly, and UC investment is also typically a multi-year investment. It is not that okay, I would try it for the next 6 months and then figure out, and then after 6 months I'll go to an on-prem environment. Right? A typical UC, a build or a UC investment is a multi-year contract, a multi-year experience, and so forth. So considering that, there are probably 2 or 3 players globally who can support most of these points or most of these claims that we are talking about. And Cisco, for that matter, stands out or leads the pack in many ways because UC as a practice was evolved right from the Webex days to where we are today. Cisco did bring up those platforms way ahead of time. They have been right from a legacy environment to a fully integrated cloud environment and so forth. So, and similarly, Microsoft today is also coming up to speed in terms of getting there. But from a partner choice, I think one has to choose a partner not by basis of how cheap he is, but by the fact of how strong is that environment, how strong can that environment continue to be during the entire tenure of the whole contract or the whole solution being deployed and so forth. So in that sense of it is how one has to choose partners. There are so many small-time providers, players who have come up. They don't get into any of the GDPR compliances lack in them. They don't have any of the if you speak specific to India, they don't have any big exposure to TRI for that matter. Similarly, when you go to a lot of other regulated countries globally, these providers, do a lot of workaround. They host their infrastructure outside of that environment and probably put the liability on the customer and so forth. So all of these, very situations kind of would not give you the exact answer for a long-term partnership. So considering some of these points, I think it's very important to choose that player. And today in the market that at least we see in our experience, we've seen Cisco and Microsoft lead the pack in a full-fledged UC environment deployment. So that's how I would recommend anybody to choose a UC partner.
Thank you. That was quite good the way you explained. Thank you. We will take one last question. I think we are running out of time. We discussed a lot of features, security, bandwidth, migration. Now, everything boils down to cost. One of the questions is around cost. How cost effective is the solution for about 1,000 plus users?
So yeah, in terms of obviously the unified license side of things, that has made it much more simpler than it was previously. It's still a function of what type of features that we're talking about, right? When we talk about a state of about 1,000 users, they're so it's directly a commercial type question. But I'm sure it depends on what sort of features and licenses overall, what sort of functionality the customer is looking for there. But they have to stay competitive, right? So if they were not, I don't think we can survive, and they won't be having the success that they are across the board, right? So not just very, very large enterprises, but also the mid-level enterprises as well. So that's what I would say. Praveen, anything to add there?
Yeah. So just a little bit is that, obviously it depends on what environment, what, feature functionality is being looked at is one aspect to look at from a cost metrics. But largely, to keep it simple, from a Cisco standpoint, at least what they've done is earlier their licensing model, as many of you may know, they had separate calling licenses and separate meeting licenses and so forth. And they had two different cost components that was, getting built in, and there was a lot of clauses in terms of who can the whole environment be exposed to from a meeting environment or from a calling environment. That is completely moved away, and they have moved into the whole new EA plan, right, which is the whole enterprise agreement plan, which integrates both the calling and meeting license together, and then brings all of the feature functionality into it together. And then what essentially happens is the cost component of having these calling and meeting licenses separately vis-a-vis the whole integrated EA license today is way cheaper, and comes with a bunch of features and functionality that help bring down a lot of cost in terms of Webex environment. EA completely eradicates the overage concept, eradicates the need for concurrent charges and so forth. So all that goes away in the no EA model. But in the earlier licensing model, these cost components were separate. Now, to keep it simpler, to promote the whole cloud environment, I think the new EA licensing model brings down the cost, and I guess it definitely will value add in terms of looking at it holistically. But yes, the OEMs have typically made sure that the cost components are simpler and are more optimized.
Okay. Thank you, Karthik. The learnings have been I think we are done with the Q&A session. Just to conclude, collaboration has become the one top need for every organization to keep the business continuity intact in these times. But in the changed reality of the workplace today, it must be ultra-agile experience for the users who are no longer working under one roof, but from multiple locations. For some organizations, even spanning continents. In this scenario, the IT leader needs the right tools to ensure a glitch-free experience for employees and their teams. Here is where an advanced collaboration platform like Cisco Webex Cloud Platform helps IT leaders deliver. I'm sure our technology leaders who are present today have found valuable insights to take home from this webinar. We couldn't take some of the questions. We will connect them with Tata Communications executives. With that, we have come to the end of this webinar. Thank you for attending. I hope you found it interesting and informative. Do remember to complete the feedback form that will be emailed to you. Everyone who sends in the completed feedback form will receive access to leadership course from Harappa Education. Thank you and goodbye.
Thanks, Mahesh. Thanks, Tata team. Thanks, Praveen.
Thank you, Karthik. Thanks, Praveen.
Thank you.
Thanks, Karthik. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.